Before I begin, I just want to say thanks to Alan Rach for just creating such a vibe of a night. Can we give him a round of applause, please? What can I say? What happened to the Tay tickets? I actually caught the ticket man from 106.5 and I said my name on the radio. They gave me 4 phones because all of them kept on stuffing up. And I was like, Camilla Velasco from Box Hill. But apparently due to camera footage, I didn't actually win first place. I got second place. So they showed me that and they said, look, got to offer you some sort of compensation. But silver lining moment though, there was a parishioner or someone from our church who was there running for her daughter. So when they said, we'll give you other tickets to other shows, I said, no, let's negotiate. There's 3 Taylor Swift tickets. If we can get one of the 3, then maybe I can give it to this church friend. And that's what happened. I gave it to that friend and she went to the concert on our behalf, carried all our hopes with her. But low-key, I was still feeling post-Tay withdrawals since that concert. I'm supposed to sing at this point, but I can't sing. You belong with me. Okay, anyway. So a bit of my faith story, a bit of my life and faith story. I have to say, before I say this bit, my family is bang smack in the middle, and I wasn't expecting all of you to come tonight, so if we could just give my family a warm welcome in this space. And if you need to fact-check anything, just talk to them. They'll tell you how much BS I speak. I have to say, growing up, we used to share a lot of stories about my father, my papa, and my siblings, which share me those details because I'm the youngest of 4. And some of those details, no doubt, were embellished or were romanticized, but all the stories I thought were really grounded in these honest conversations that were very few and far in between, especially the ones that I would have with my dad and my mum. Stories of Papa recalled what it was like for him growing up after World War II in the Philippines. My dad is Filipino, also known in the Filipino language of Tagalog as Pilipino. So that's P for an F. And so I sometimes describe him as the poor, penniless peanut salesman growing up, only because it's an alliteration. Well, no, not really. Because it's also true that he knew a sense of poverty, of not having his own money to take care of himself, and having to work hard for that by selling things on the street. And he, in fact, didn't know the word mother until he was 12. And what I mean by that is because her biological mother hid her identity from him, until he became 12. Now, was it shame or was it powerlessness or was it something else? We actually don't know. And Papa would also not know the word father until he was in his 30s, until he had a father-in-law in the person of my mom's dad. And on the day that they were married, the story goes, one of my father's phrases to my mother was, thank you. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for the gift of a father finally in my life. Thank you for the gift of knowing you as a place that I now call home. And I can only imagine what kind of hunger would have been on my dad's heart, the kind of hunger that would have made a person want to know if he was loved, if he was loved as someone's child. And in trying to put words to my dad's heartfelt longing, I'm reminded of language that I've learned in my Christian upbringing, where Jesus heals apparently this man named Bartimaeus, who's a blind man, if you don't know the story. And in this moving scene, there are crowds, there are people, and they're surrounding Jesus, and maybe he's growing in popularity because he's a miracle worker. But all of a sudden, Bartimaeus is in that crowd and he's yelling. He's crying out to Jesus. But the crowd basically says, bro, shut up, stop what you're doing. Jesus doesn't have time for you. And Jesus, however, stops amid the noise, and he gives Bartimaeus his full attention and presence. Jesus looks at this shunned person who's shunned by others and sees Bartimaeus for who he is, a person longing to be whole. And I imagine all that longing going through Bartimaeus, longing just to be seen, longing just to see. And in a similar way, I imagine all that longing in my dad, longing just to be seen. And so I wonder, Papa, did you experience wholeness too when someone saw you and gave you their full presence? Through your father-in-law, did you experience the love of a parent that you thought you would never have? Did you experience some sort of restoration and healing? And did you finally see yourself as maybe more lovable than you imagined? And as adults, we get on living. There's work, there's cine prices, there's a domestic life. Some of you perhaps are raising your own children. But none of those realities ever change the fact that you are and have been once upon a time someone's child. And so maybe you've known that for yourself too. Maybe you've known the joy of your own parents saying to you, I'm proud of you. Or maybe your story is like my father's, wondering, what do my parents think of me? What do my parents think of me right now? And are they proud? Do I know that they love me? And am I wanted? And so my papa's story wove more personally with my own when my wife and I were trying to have kids. For the first 5 years of our marriage, we were on the up and down roller coaster of wondering, would children be our story? From having a plan to have kids, to testing, to supplements, to natural fertility doctors, to naturopaths, it seemed like perhaps it wouldn't be part of our story. And so my wife and I shared the decision that if we couldn't fall pregnant together, then we would either adopt or delegate our energies to some other sort of caring role that we couldn't have for children, like caring for our parents, or we do some sort of volunteering locally or overseas. In fact, we even considered going to Canada pre-COVID, so this was 2019, and Canada, just because, Alanis Morissette, Justin Bieber, all the good things in Canada, kind of feels like the inner west, maybe more affordable than Sydney, I don't know. But we thought altogether a change of scene. And so there came a bittersweet point where we thought, okay, this is our reality. We will not have children. But then there was a silver lining moment, our very own 1 in 3 chance to get a Tay-Tay ticket opportunity, a final procedure that we both wanted to go through. My wife discovered that she had endometriosis that could be surgically treated, and so we went with it. And somehow, just before COVID wiped out all that elective surgery, we squeezed in. And we were advised by the surgeon and our naturopath at the time that the best time to try for kids was just after the operation, after the healing had happened, of course, but just after the operation. Otherwise, endometriosis could come back. And so what happened was one of the hardest conversations I have to say that I've had with my wife since. And if you haven't met her, my wife is here tonight as well, Mei. If you could give us a wave wherever you are in that corner. And so that night at dinner, at our table, with tears in her eyes, she said, I don't want to have children. I don't want to have children. Again, at this point, post-surgery, best chance to have children. I don't want to have children. I'll be real, I was confused, pretty pissed. I was frustrated and I was hurt. And I didn't know what to say at first. But I don't know what it was. Maybe it was all those years of volunteering, whether it was in the wider community or at my local church. I couldn't help but feel grateful for this one attitude. And I could hear my sister, who isn't here tonight, I could hear her drumming this into me. Mate, Donnie, it's not about you, buddy. It's not about you. And so there was enough of me to kind of say, park your stuff, Donnie, have a chat. Mei, where's this coming from? What are you feeling when you say you don't want to have children? I can see you're convinced by this. Help me see what you see. What's your truth? And I was blown away by her response because she said, I don't want to have children because I believed I am so loved by God, whether or not I have kids. And I want to trust, even if it's painful, that my dignity and my inherent worth precedes me having produced anything or doing anything, including children. I thought, what am I supposed to say to that? I could hear her, and I could feel the ache in me, coupled with the shame of knowing I wanted a different path. And I wondered, was I selfish? Was it my pride? Was it because I was hurt? And again, not knowing what to do, I leaned back into this Christian language that gives me some sort of foundation when I don't seem to know the right words to say or the path to take. And if there's anything that my relationship with God has taught me time and time again, just like a volunteer, mate, Donnie, it's not about you. And I think about the Christian story, at the core is a person who surrendered and said, God, not my will, but yours. Not me, but the other. So I clenched my teeth. I admitted to my wife, Mei, I can't agree with you. I can't agree with how you feel. But I will trust in your trust, and I will go where you will go. And if you don't want to have children, then I will trust that too. So that night we made the shared decision to let go of children as our number one priority. and instead focus on the wholeness and the abundance and the fullness and the presence of whatever life was in our current season at that time. And it took me some days after that experience, that dinner conversation, until I was able to share more articulately what was going on for me. Why was I so pissed? And at that point, I have to say, in our family, my parents already had grandchildren, 5 in fact, from my sister and my eldest brother, Celestina. And somewhere in me, knowing my father's story of never knowing his biological parents as a child, never knowing their embrace or how it felt to grow up with them, it has often made me wonder, what impression did that leave on my papa growing up? What did it leave on him growing up parentless? I've asked him directly a few times, and he struggled to put words to that experience. And so here I was, wanting to make an offering to him, a chance to say, hey, Papa, you don't need to search anymore. You don't need to wonder at the worth of your life, for here is its fruit. Here's another grandchild. Your longing has found a home. You're okay, and we're okay. And so all is okay. And to feel like I couldn't offer that to my dad by not having children, that's why it hurt. But what Mei was trying to teach me through her own realization of self-worth was something that I've been trying to adopt. And it's that even my good intentions of trying to gift my grandchildren to my father, even that good gift was something I had to let go of and surrender. Trusting that even that belongs to God, rather than be something that I proudly claim as something I manufactured myself. And so the lesson of surrendering control and ego for me connects with language that I struggle to find. And so I leverage again off my Christian upbringing. And I think of this guy. There's this guy named Moses, and I'm sure you've heard of him, Prince of Egypt. Chosen by God, he uses a staff, parts the Red Sea. Whoosh. Apparently Whitney and Mariah sang to him. There can be, and you know how the rest of that goes. And in this story, there's a particular line that God uses when Moses is about to encounter God face to face. God says something like, I must cover you because you cannot see my face and live. It's a bit strange. I must cover you because you cannot see my face and live. And I've come to hear that phrase as something like, there are those times in your life when you experience something so much bigger than yourself, which is also somehow able to touch the deepest parts of yourself. And when that happens, you can't help but be moved. It's that beautiful sunrise. It's that open ocean that crashes on the shore, if you're not afraid of water. That's my thing. Your love of sport, or even your first love, that Spotify track that brings you to life, or your best friend or your family, the one that you love, that you call home, or even perhaps when there's a death in the family that reminds you that life is so short. The flip of that, the birth of a child that makes you realize that life also carries so much potential. I've come to learn that to truly have this kind of transcendent encounter, something beyond yourself, requires so much of your own personal involvement. So much so that when you experience this, you feel like what you thought was true, what you thought was unmovable, this view that you had of life, that view somehow needs to be let go of and needs to pass away and needs to die in order for you to be open to this bigness and this moreness, in order to be able to encounter this infinite within and beyond yourself. Wow, I'm slobbering everywhere. And so on the 4th of April, a screech came from the mouth of a raised baby above my wife's womb, and the words of Scripture came to life before me. Despite all my dreams, ambition, my desire, my planning, my controlling, my rationalizing and aspiring, all gave way to a path I would have never chosen myself. I could not see the face of God and live, and so there was our first child, Jonathan. Now, I wish I could tell you that's it, story's over, happy ending, prayers answered. But 2 things keep coming to mind even in that moment. The first, and any parent in the room can attest to this, in as much as there is joy, infinite joy in having a child, there are times when Jonathan, which in Hebrew literally means God's gift, can sometimes look and feel like what I had for Christmas one time, which was a PlayStation, but in the box was just underwear. So you get what I'm saying. Alongside the good times, there are those times where Mei and I are sometimes at each other, or we're at Jonathan, or both. We fight and we love as a family, all under the same roof. Greatest gift, greatest burden. Two realities can exist at the same time. Family can be both transformative and necessarily humanly messy, and we're both a work in progress. Secondly, to think of Jonathan as our faith or our prayer being answered for me has a particular nuanced risk of oversimplifying things. Again, I'll say that again. For me, it runs the risk of reducing prayer and faith as a mere transaction with God, who becomes set up as some sort of benevolent capitalist. I prayed, God, and now you pay. You know, there's my shopping, and I get Jonathan. It's like some magic trick that happens, and I don't think I buy that. What about all my friends who have struggled and who still struggle to conceive? What of all my family and friends who have lost children? Didn't they pray? Even beyond the prayers for birth, what about people's situations when they prayed for a loved one and it didn't work out? Those who prayed for healing or freedom in a relationship, be it domestic violence or from poverty, what about their situation? What about those who pray in this very moment in the conflicts between Israel and Palestine, Ukraine and Russia, or Myanmar and Burkina Faso, which, by the way, doesn't receive as much attention? Is their prayer not working? I don't know about you, but I don't think my wife and my experience becomes now my piece of authority to say what God wills and what God doesn't, what God intends and what God doesn't. The reality of suffering challenges my notions of faith and prayer as being more than mere transactions. Reality challenges me to hold at arm's length lines like, suffering is a cross you must bear, or suffering is something that God gives you that you can handle, or that God is testing your character by making you suffer. And these very same sentiments are challenged by the late Australian Catholic Bishop Geoffrey Robinson, who quotes a rabbi, in fact, when he says, "Those who suffer need more sympathy than advice, even good advice, and compassion more than learned theological explanations. They need friends who permit them to be angry, to cry, and to scream. They do not need people more concerned with their own needs to protect their understanding of God." So how do I hold all of this then? Because clearly I'm seeing this journey with Mei and Jonathan as a faith-filled journey. I'm seeing it as a treasure that my Christian upbringing has given me language for. How do I hold suffering and the reality of this experience without dismissing or disguising anything? And I take my example then from Mary, the mother of Jesus. I take my example particularly from her at the foot of the cross to get some language for this. Now, terms have been written on her experience, and it's too much for a night like tonight, and don't worry, I'm almost done. But here's one take that I've read about Mary's experience. And some would say, when you look at Mary, she lucked out. A teenager gets the title, God's chosen, mother to the Savior of the world. Imagine that on your TikTok influencer title. Holy smoke, the views on that. And it sounds so promising, it sounds so hopeful. But after 30 years, there's Mary watching her son nailed to a tree. Now, some spiritual writers like Father Ronald Rollheiser suggest that in Mary's position, she could have easily said, "Hey, not fair. Where's my lawyer? Where's my justice? I want what's mine. I want what's right." I mean, what would the parents in the room have to say? What would the mothers in the room have to say? And so Father Ron Rollheiser makes this very delicate point and sees Mary as someone who doesn't lay blame, who doesn't demand what's right, who doesn't answer violence with violence, and she neither condones nor resists the suffering she is seeing on her son. In the face of suffering, she merely ponders, and she shows us that when you ponder in silence, that's what prayer can look like. When you ponder in silence, it means that your prayer is one that doesn't claim to have all the answers, but it's a searching, hopeful trust that asks, what does this all mean? What can it mean? And I don't know what it means, but I'll be here. pondering with you, my son. And so I stand with each and every one of you, having experienced this transformative experience of becoming a father, which at the same time makes me feel unprocessed and unfinished and messy. And I stand with you now in the midst of your questions, your doubts, your hopes. And as others, I hope also offer in this space, I offer you a friendship that permits you to either be angry or to be hopeful, rather than offering some clever or polished answer to the mystery of life, which I am still processing. I stand with you now as Mary does, in whatever you're experiencing right now, asking these questions together. What can it mean? What does it mean? We search in hopeful trust together.